Okay, cool. So, let's start. As PJ said, I'm Sabrina, I'm from Brazil. So, se vocês quiserem escutar um sotaque estranho e falar português comigo, podem vir falar. I am already used to having a silly accent in English in the UK anyway, so that's great. And I'm going to talk to you about how, at our company, we changed our code and our culture during a very intensive rewrite project. So this is what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk about lessons that we've learned during that rewrite, and hopefully will help you if you ever have to go through that. We had a talk about legacy code before. It looks like everyone has to go through this one time or another. I'm also going to show you some code. And in the end, I'm going to talk about how the company changed the way we worked and the way we develop products. As PJ said as well, I work for Songkick. Songkick is a live music company helping fans around the world go to more concerts and artists and promoters to sell more tickets. So we'll notify users about their favorite bands so they can see them live when they come to play in their town. And Songkick for a startup is a pretty old one. It's been around for 8 years. And way back in 2009, we launched a new version of the website. And that one was the one that we thought was going to be the most exciting one. And the years since then, we were adding new features, experimenting with the product, trying out new things, and trying if we could see that big exponential graph that you can see every startup wants to see. But over time, we were noticing, and the whole company was noticing, that it was taking longer and longer for us to release new features and make changes to the code base, a very common pattern. Sorry. So that was our issue. So I'll start with a metaphor. Yes. At Songkick, we also love metaphors, and this one is one of my favorites. So a comb-over. No one wakes up one morning and decides to get a comb-over. It happens gradually. So every day you're combing your hair in a different way, and then one day you wake up and you realize that you have a comb-over. No one goes to work one day and decides to build this. It happens gradually. So yeah, we had our monolith, we had our Rails application that was becoming this huge, horrible monolith. We decided to rewrite it and split it into libraries and projects, and this is what you're seeing here. You don't have to read it, but it shows you all the different projects we have and the dependency graph between all of them. So if you see the top project with all the lines coming off of it, if you made a change there, you'd have to rebuild all the projects below it to make sure that you didn't break it, because all the code was loaded into the same project. Yeah, it was hell. Yeah, even making small changes was really hard for us, and that meant that we weren't refactoring the code base as we should, which makes things worse and worse and worse over time. So, small improvements to the code base weren't really cutting anymore. Something drastic had to happen. And that's what we decided to do. So we decided to change. Everyone's kicking the water as well. There are 5 bottles of water that will kick to the side. Anyway, so our decision was to break the code dependencies into domain services and the front-end applications that use them. So a service-oriented architecture. That's quite a popular choice nowadays, a very common choice. This was 4 years ago, so maybe it wasn't that much back then. But for us, what we wanted was to be able to work on products independently, be able to push them independently and know that we're not going to break something else. So that was the idea. But how do you start, right? And do you do a complete rewrite? You know, everyone says that you shouldn't do that it never works, and you never finish it, and it's even worse if you just start over. But it worked for us. So I'll start sharing some of the lessons that we've learned during when we went through that project and how we finished it, which is the most important thing when you're going through a rewrite. Now I'm going to get my water. So step 0 for us was to know your product. Before this project started, I was telling you that we were adding lots of different features to Songkick, and we were. The product was really bloated and full of awesome live music-related features, but we didn't really know exactly what was the main reason and the main proposition that users came back to Songkick. So our product team did a lot of user research, a lot of research, and asking our users and finding out what was the main reason they came back. And for us, the tagline is to track your favorite artists so you never miss them live. So the most important thing for Songkick is to have all the events that are happening all over the world so we can notify the right users about them. They can get tickets, they can go see their bands and be happy. Knowing your product helps you understand your code base and where to split and where are the boundaries between the services that you're eventually going to build. It also helps you focus on delivering what matters the most to your users first. So that's step 1, or 0, know your product. Yeah, we wanted to go from there to here. So this is a graph that we drew at the time of the end state, and it kind of looks already like this with more products and front ends right now. But this was our lovely sunny end state where we wanted to get to. But how do you... So we knew what the services we had. We knew what the Songkick product was. But how do you go from a messy dependency graph to this lovely end state? For us, the way we started, it was starting where it was the riskiest, because the rewrite project itself is a risky project, so you start where you'd see the most benefits the quickest. A rewrite, as I said, is risky, so if you start from the sidelines and if you don't really tackle the most business valuable features and projects that you have, it's very likely that you're not going to finish the project, because you're going to be pulled back to working on the business valuable features, and you're going to have lots of levels of legacy and trials for rewrites, which we definitely had as well. So yeah, for us, the end goal was to improve our front-end Rails application, so the project that powers the Songkick.com website. We wanted to iterate quickly on the website, so then we just started pushing down the complexity and the legacy away from the Rails application so we can change it quickly. So the idea is that we started creating those Ruby service classes to decouple the front end from the back end. And this would also give us the opportunity to understand the services and the API endpoints that we have, and the responses that we would have for those services when we eventually create them. Yeah, and as you can see, we weren't really trying to change everything at the same time. We have a happy, sunny state for a Rails application, but we'll still have lots of legacy underneath it, which is fine, because what's also important is to have one main goal. This was the goal for the rewrite project for us. And you can see that the main reason we were doing this is because we wanted to move faster. So if we knew that if we kept Songkick's main proposition, users wouldn't go away. But we were doing this rewrite not for them or for the technology's sake or for any sake. We were doing it because we wanted to be faster and improve our velocity. The possibility of starting over is really exciting. And if you give the opportunity to anyone here to start over, they'll think about all the different ways that they can improve things and make it perfect. But it's very tempting to try to work on everyone's new features, or pet issues. But this lack of focus makes it very difficult to finish a project like this. And for us, having one main goal made it easier for us to reject unrelated changes and just focus on moving fast, which is what we needed. Cool. The other thing that's very important is knowing where to start, but also knowing when it ends. So we defined the full project scope of this written Rails application. We wrote down on index cards every single feature that we still wanted to maintain. We guesstimated how long it would take for each one of those, and then we realized that this would take way longer than the company could afford. We'd probably go bankrupt if we did the whole thing. So we cut even more features and things that we thought weren't really part of the main proposition, until we figured out a date that we could afford. And having that deadline and having that defined scope was very important. We would also reevaluate weekly our progress. So this is a burn-down chart of the project. This is it. This is what happened. In reality, it took 3 months. A burn-down chart is basically a graph where you can see work left versus time. So if you follow that green line, that would be a perfect execution. But you can also see if you have a scope creep or you're going under time. So it's a very useful feature of this graph. And it's also very useful to review that you're actually reaching that deadline that you set, because it's a guesstimate. Yes, and also don't add new features if you're doing a rewrite. So for us, at a time, having something out there moving fast again was the most important thing we could do. So during this rewrite, we would either rewrite a feature or delete it. And speaking of deleting, yes, deleting is definitely faster than rewriting. And if you can, you should, because it's easier and faster. As I said, again, because we knew the main proposition for Songkick, we could decide which features to keep or not. We used and analyzed data about how our users were using those features. And we also asked all of the development team for input on features that were hard to maintain. And we reevaluated if they're actually delivering the value that they were for the costs that they were costing us to maintain. Yeah. It was personally very hard for me to delete those features because, I've been at Songkick for 7 years and I wrote most of those features. And I'm also a huge user of Songkick, but I'm not an average Songkick user. So, yeah, again, knowing the product gives you the confidence to know what's okay to delete without losing your users. It's also very satisfying to delete code. I don't know if people like that, but I do like it. I don't know why. It's weird. It's like cleaning your flat or something. Yeah. Another lesson that we learned is to validate your assumptions. So you come up with that big plan of how you want the end state to be. The sooner you can get a validation that you're in the right path, the better. So the way that we decided to rewrite the application wasn't by creating a new project or branching out. It was by rewriting from the inside on master and released page by page. As we rewrote it, we would release to our users. So it was a bit messy during the rewrite, but it was great to get that feedback, both from our users and from the code base, and to see if we actually liked the way that we were working now. So, yeah, it was a complete rewrite, but it wasn't a stop-the-world rewrite. We could still release bug fixes and see the progress of the changes we were making in one place. And the other benefit for this is that it improved our release process. So we wanted to be fast and move fast. We wanted to move towards continuous deployment. And doing the release iteratively of each page at a time helped us improve the full release process. And speaking of that, so a fast release cycle needs a fast build. As I said, the Songkick project was quite old, and we had a lot of tests. Our build was taking hours to run, and that was parallelized, and that was running in the AWS, and it was costing us a lot of money. So again, what I said about making changes, it was hard. It was taking time. You had to wait 4 hours for the build to run, and then find out that it broke for something that wasn't related to what you did. That wasn't fun at all. After the rewrite, the Rails app is running the Rails app's tests are running in under a minute, and our end-to-end tests are running at around 5 minutes. So yeah, how do you do that? How do you make the build faster? Oh, you delete the tests. Sure, no, I love tests. You delete some tests, and you rewrite most of them. So the way that we did it was we deleted most of our end-to-end tests. So the tests that were testing the database, the background jobs, our queue, everything, most of those were gone. The only ones that we kept were ones that were selected by our tester and our product owner. And those were the tests that would give them confidence that we could release code to production without breaking. And that test would test, again, the Songkick's main proposition. So can you sign up users? Can you track an artist? Are you going to get the event in your calendar? All of those main things that would, if we break, that would be pretty bad. But it wouldn't test every single feature on Songkick. For those, we would write unit tests or smaller integration or functional tests. And then for some of them, we would just delete. So a slow build discourages refactoring, slowly deteriorating your code base and the code quality. And a fast release cycle for us meant that the cost of making a small change is also small. So you're actually going to keep refactoring and improving your code base as you go. And to cope with the risk of fewer tests, we set up logging and monitoring, so we get notified when there are spikes and errors. We also get a daily email with every single error that happened on production. And we keep on top of those so that we can spot new issues really clearly if it's a new deploy. And because fixing things and releasing fixes is really quick, you'll do that. That's fine. Cool. Learning to iterate. So the release process itself is not just about software. At the start of the project, we were writing code really quickly, writing the tests really quickly, but then when we actually had to release to production, there were lots of manual checks that were still being made by testers, copy changes were checked by our product owner, design checks, and all of that. And that's when we realized that we weren't really working together as a whole team. It wasn't just a matter of rewriting code, we needed to change the whole product development process that we had. And the way that we found to make that happen was to talk about things and give developers the right context to make those small decisions, well, not small, but given enough context and tools for the developers themselves to own the product quality and design and copy even. So if you know how to use design components or you know what the voice of your product is, you can make those decisions as a developer. You don't need to have a manual check by someone else. And also, again, because the release process is really fast, if there are any problems or any issues, we can quickly release a new build to production. Cool. So I talked about lots of lessons. Now I'm going to show you some code. Yeah, this is the new front-end architecture that we defined, and this is how we were rewriting each page at a time. So does anyone know this guy? I don't know, maybe. It's a Portuguese singer that I like. Yeah, cool. So this is an event page on Songcake. As I said, we started where it was the riskiest, and for us on Songcake, the event page is the riskiest because that's where we sell tickets and that's where we make our money. So that was the first page we changed. The way that we would go about each page was to get together with designers and product managers and define and name the page and all of its components. So a component here is all those things with the pink rectangular and names. And for us, they are discrete modules of functionality on the page. They function independently of other components. So I'll talk to you through about the event brief component. So yeah, pretty straightforward Rails app structure, I guess, with a couple of extra modules that I'm going to talk to you about now in relation to the event brief component. Cool. I hope you can see that. So, starting with the controller. So we deleted everything inside the actual method, and the only thing we kept was an instantiation of a page, what we call a page model, which is a class that represents the template. So a venue page, an event page, an artist page. They'll all have a class representing them. And then the page model itself would create the components that it needs to display itself, or the actions that it needs to perform if it's a form or something like that. So here it's creating an event brief. And here's the brief component doing the presentation logic for that component. So we're removing a lot of the presentation logic that usually would be in a template and put it in a Ruby class, which is much easier to test. And as you can see here, the page event brief is specifically for that event page. So it's not an artist brief, it's an event brief. For us, shared components are the exception. And I'll tell you why with this great joke about CSS, I don't know. So after years working on the same Rails application, what we learned is that it's really painful to reuse templates in CSS. So you start off with one selector, and then you're like, oh my god, how do I change this to be a different color? And then you're like, well, if I change this, it's actually going to change something in a completely unrelated page, and I have no idea, so I'm like, yeah, everyone laughs at this one. But yeah, the way we fix this is by repeating ourselves. So if you don't repeat yourself in the domain model and the business logic, that's a great thing. But in the front end, we're fine with repetition, and we're fine with duplication if it means less or fewer CSS statements, if statements in your templates or fewer CSS overrides. The thing that's most important for us in the front end is knowing where that if you make a change, you know what components will be affected by it. So if we have a new component, our first reaction is to create a new one instead of reusing it, unless it behaves and looks exactly the same. And it's a decision, as another one that we already have, and it's a decision that's made not only by the developer, but by the design team and the product manager as well. So they understand that, we're reusing this. If you change it here, you want to change it again in 2 months' time, it was going to change this other page as well. So that has greatly reduced the number of style and presentation bugs we had. And it makes it easier for us to experiment and change our web application as we wish, because we know exactly what's going to change. So yeah, ERB, I told you guys that this is an old Rails project. So this is the template for the page and for the component, and they're all consistently named, again, with the Ruby classes, the files, and the CSS selectors. The CSS itself, for each page, we have a different CSS file with all the components and imported that the page needs. And all the style sheet and the JavaScript and the images are all namespaced with that name of the component. So you know exactly what's changing, and you know exactly that this is not going to affect other components on the page. And yeah, by defining those pages and those components together with designers and the product managers, it actually created this shared language that we have and that we use every time we're talking about the products that we use, from the idea to the code base, and it's always using the same language. And that shared understanding for us makes it easier to talk about things. I mean, it sounds really simple, but it's super powerful when you're actually using the same language to talk about things. And for a developer as well, like if a designer, for example, tells me there's a bug in the event brief component, even if I don't know the project, I can expect to find a file with that name, and I'll know that something in the code will have the same name. So that was really good, a good side effect of this. Cool. So at the same time that we were rewriting the controllers and the views, we were also decoupling the presentation from our domain models for our first step towards our service-oriented architecture. So I'll show you a little bit of how that went about. If we had a controller, very straightforward, with instantiating an event that's an active record model, we would replace that with an active record, with a client-specific model class, so we call models event. So far, so good. That class will call a service to get its data. So this is an instance of a service called event listing service. And the data that it would instantiate itself would be a plain, like Ruby core data type, so a hash. And that's that. So the main magic here for us is to make sure that only the service classes at this rewrite process were allowed to talk to active record models. So this is the only, and the active record model itself would return the hash representing the data. Starting out like this for us meant that we could easily change the services and the responses that those services were returning, because they were still in the same project, so it was quite easy to change and iterate and get the services in the way that we were happy with. And at the same time, we already had the benefits of decoupling the presentation from the domain logic. So if we stopped here, we already have a pretty good front-end application. So this is what we had up to that point, right, of having the active record with a Ruby service class. And once we had the service, the actual HTTP service, all we had to do was replace it with a GET for that service, and everything would work out fine. Hopefully. Yeah, and it would look like this. So you rinse and repeat from every single page on soundclick.com until we finish. And yeah, we did finish, and that was pretty awesome. Oh yeah, I have another sunny Wednesday. There was still legacy below that in the services themselves, but that was enough for us to be able to move fast. And we did the rewrite project with no downtime. Our users didn't go away. Our website actually was faster, which was pretty weird. I forgot to add that graph, but anyway, it happened. And we as a team, importantly, most importantly, the goal that we had, we were faster. So the rewrite finished in February 2012, a long time ago, and you can see here the number of releases per month that we had greatly increased, which is pretty amazing. Nowadays, we're still doing the same number of releases, but we have many more products and services. But yeah, this is not just a graph of productivity, it's also a graph of team happiness. Because yeah, everyone wants to work in a code base that you can feel productive, right? So I'm going to finish by talking about how, during this project, we found a better way of working together as a product team. Yes. So during those rewrite months, developers, product managers, basically the whole company, designers, testers, we're all helping each other out to finish this as quickly as we can. I mean, we're all here, we're all there to create a product that users love and add new features and build something exciting. We weren't there to rewrite code, so we wanted to get this over with as quickly as we could. And the way that we got there was by collaborating, and that collaboration changed the way Songkick's culture and the way we work together. The main way that happened is because we had a better understanding of each other's part of the product development puzzle. Like developers felt more comfortable suggesting like simpler solutions. Designers and product managers kind of understood the costs of building their ideas. So we just learned from each other during that process. And what we realized is that the product magic for us happens in the middle here. When you meet business goals, user needs, and technical feasibility, that's where product magic happens. So from then on, the way that we work now at Songkick, and that's been 3 years, is by having product teams. And each product team has those 3 leaders, a product manager, design lead, and a tech lead. And our teams are cross-functional and independent. So they own the products and the services that they deliver, and they deliver value based on our business goals. So the way that we define the product teams is by, from the business goals, coming up with an idea. For example, if the strategy is to grow the number of users, that's a business goal. Our mobile team metric, for example, could be weekly activated users of the iOS or Android apps. But how the mobile team is going to get to that place and how they're going to increase that metric is completely up to them. There are no external checkpoints. The teams own their results and how they get there. And I already spoke about other ways that our culture changed our process through the shared language that we have, small and frequent releases, and iterative design and product development. So I'll finish off by talking about 2 more ways that we changed the way we work together. So before, we used to have like feature stories being delivered to developers by designers and product managers after weeks of thinking about crazy ideas, and then they'll tell developers, this is what you need to build. And you're like, but why? It's too late already. We've decided we're building this. And we realized that was completely unsustainable. So now we bring developers much earlier into this idea development process, and we also define what we're building and why together. So we have what we call feature kickoff meetings with developers that are actually writing the code, with the product manager, designers, testers, or anyone that has any input into that feature. And in that session, we're going to define what we're building, and most importantly, we're going to understand why we're building it. We can ask questions, raise issues, and define what we're doing together as a team. And the other way we finish this is before, again, similar way, a designer will come up with a design idea, do it in Photoshop, and then just hand it over to a developer to implement it. But well, Photoshop is not HTML and CSS. It's very difficult to actually translate one to the other. But developers just feel frustrated that they couldn't deliver exactly what was designed. So what we do now is we pair with designers to work on the front end and the design of our products. And this is a great thing both for developers because we can give input and give feedback as we're going. And for designers, it makes them happier because it gives them an understanding of what's possible to achieve with the code. And for everyone, it's really interesting because it encourages a wider team to understand and get involved with the way that the product looks and feels. So, to finish off, having a clean code base is just a means to an end to deliver great products to your users, wherever they may be. So for us, going for this rewrite project, the main takeaway that we had is that we learn to collaborate and work together. So get closer to the business or product teams at your company, learn what's important to them, and help them understand what's important to you so that we can build better products and software together. For us, like it's been 3 years, over 3 years since we've been through this project, and we hadn't had to rewrite anything like this ever. Hopefully not ever again. Because we're working in this way meant that for us we're happier teams, we have better products, and it even improved our code quality. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, I also have like Songkick swag and tote bags and stuff. If anyone wants to talk to me about that or just want some swag, just come find me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wait, don't run away yet.
No? Okay.
Any questions?
I found it interesting that you said you started with the one page that actually generates revenue for the company.
Yeah.
That surprised me. I was wondering if you could explain why you started there, and that was potentially the riskiest place.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to that idea that the rewrite was so necessary for the company that we wanted to prove that that was the right choice for us to do that way. So doing with the page that was the riskiest for us was it was actually the page that we wanted to work and improve the most, because if we improved that page, we could sell more tickets. So yeah, just starting where the most impactful, business valuable feature was for us. That was the reason. It is risky, but the whole rewrite project is risky, so we just went with the riskiest. Yeah. Hi. Oh, shit.
Hi. Is it working? Yes. Out of all of those services, how standard are they? Are they all HTTP? Mm-hmm. Are they SOAP? Yeah. God forbids.
No, they are all HTTP services. The response format standard, yeah, we understood how they would be more similar over time, but yeah, they're all HTTP, REST-ish services. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can't see any. Any more questions? Yeah, there's one here. One more question. Yeah. Did you have a backup plan? You said, Yeah, so he asked if we had a backup plan.
Yeah, so the question is, did you have a backup plan? I mean, it sounds like a dream to do this, I think.
Yeah.
Most people have worked on really big projects. So was there a backup plan if, let's say, your test with this revenue-generating page would go south?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there wasn't a backup plan, and I really don't recommend going through a rewrite like this because it was very stressful, because it got to... The reason why we had the time to do this was because it was so bad that the whole company was counting on it. So yeah, it was either that or I guess our iPhone app was the backup plan. We would just have a mobile app. I think that would be the backup plan. Just turn off the website. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Any more questions? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi. That was a great talk. I'm not sure if I missed it, but I'm making sure by asking, what would you do differently, if anything? Any regrets?
The rewrite itself?
Not doing it earlier? Or
yeah, not
how
doing
would
it
you
earlier.
Yeah.
Definitely not doing it earlier. Not speaking up, like as a developer, not communicating how costly it is to maintain the features that we're building to the product owners and the designers. I think that's my biggest lesson. Like, we are professionals, so we're responsible for clearly communicating that features have a cost and explaining that to non-technical people. And yeah, that would be my biggest.
Okay. Was it hard to sell the technical debt problem? Because often people want features, and they don't want you to take time to work on it.
Yeah, it was. Again, like, because it was so bad, as I was saying, it had to go that bad for us to actually be able to explain in a way that everyone would understand. But now it's been a long time, and we've hired new people since then, and it's become this like this myth about Songkick, this rewrite project. We have a name for it. We talk about it, and new product managers or designers that we hire, we can point to this and say, we're never doing this again. So now it's easier, but it's still pretty hard. yeah, I think we're lucky that, well, lucky, I don't know. We're lucky that we survived this so that now we can talk about it and explain how difficult it is.
It sounds like it was a big bang event at Songkick.
It was a
like
transformational
a
event, yes,
yeah.
for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
So it took a crisis to kick it off, almost.
Yes, it did, yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend that to be the case, but yeah, it did.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Cool.
Think we're good?
Yeah, cool, thank you. I'll be around tomorrow and today.